All right, so first order of business is everybody turn off your cell phones, please. If you haven't done so already. Good morning. Labodienia. Yo, koso. Servos. Bonjour. Shalom. My name is Lawrence Greenspan. I'm one of the two co-founders, along with Joel Diener, who would have greeted you on the way in, of the National Holocaust Monument Committee. I want to first acknowledge that we are on the unceded land of the Algonquin Anishinaabeg First Nation territory. Those who know me know that I'm not a big fan of acknowledgement without action. I'll leave that one for another day. This year, Yom HaShoah will pay tribute to the 80th anniversary of the deportation of 440,000 Jews from Hungary from May 15th to July 9th, 1944. Most were deported to Auschwitz-Birkenau, where they were killed, the majority in gas chambers. By the end of July 1944, the only Jewish community left in Hungary was that of Budapest, the capital. Ce matin, étant donné ce qui se passe au monde, j'ai arrêté pour un moment penser si ils seront ici. Qu'est-ce que va se passer s'ils étaient ici? This morning, in light of what is taking place around the world, I stopped for a moment and I wondered whether they would be here and what might happen if they were. That moment of hesitation, that moment of, well, fear, should not be present here at the National Holocaust Monument, but it was and it is. J'aimerais inviter Annette Wildgoose, présidente du comité du monument à l'Holocauste national, de vous dire bienvenue, surtout les étudiants qui sont ici. I want to invite Annette Wildgoose, who's the president of the National Holocaust Monument Committee, to welcome all of you, especially the students, to this hallowed and important place during this difficult time. Annette?
Good morning and welcome to the National Holocaust Monument in Ottawa, as well as to our viewers who are joining us via live stream. Bonjour et bienvenue au Monument National de l'Holocauste à Ottawa, ainsi qu'à nos téléspectateurs qui se joignent à nous via live stream. Le très honorable Monsieur Trudeau, Premier ministre du Canada, Monsieur Poilievre, chef de l'opposition, Mayor Sutcliffe, invited speakers and guests, welcome, bienvenue, shalom. We gather here in Yom HaShoah to commemorate, as Lawrence has just said, the 400,000 Jews from Budapest in 1944, almost 80 years ago to the day, as well as recognizing diplomats and individuals who went the extra mile to save Jewish lives and teach about the Holocaust to their students. Souvenons-nous également de ceux qui ont donné leur vie sur les plages de Normandie pendant la Deuxième Guerre mondiale, 1944, parmi lesquels se trouvaient de nombreux soldats canadiens. This would lead to the liberation of France and the rest of Western Europe and laid the foundations of the Allied victory against Nazism. To the Holocaust survivors who are with us today, David Moskovich, Vera Gara, Dora Goldman, Ruth Katz, Judy Young-Drich, thank you seems somehow insufficient for all that you have done for Holocaust remembrance. Your presence is at the very core of today's ceremony. So many people gave so much. Forgetting is not an option. A special thank you to the students from Sir Robert Borden High School, Nepean High School, Ottawa Jewish Community School, Torah Day School, who are with us this morning. A special thank you to the teachers for organizing this. Le Monument National de l'Holocauste est un puissant témoignage de l'importance de préserver la mémoire de l'Holocauste et de promouvoir la tolérance et la compréhension. The National Holocaust Monument Committee is very grateful to all of our partners and sponsors for your assistance and contribution. Merci. Bienvenue.
Thank you, Annette, for those remarks, and far more importantly, for all of the work that you've done as the real inspiration for this National Holocaust Monument and the committee. I'd like to call upon the survivors that are here today, one by one, to come forward and light a candle. First, Dora Goldman. Born in Mako, Hungary, 1933, in June 1944, she and her family were deported by train headed for Auschwitz. Their lives were spared when the train tracks were bombed out. Dora would spend almost a year in a work camp in Austria and would return to Hungary only to find out that her father had lost his life in a forced labor camp on the Eastern Front. Dora, if you would please come forward. Thank you. Judy Young-Drach, Hungary. Judy was born in Budapest in 1943. Just before her parents were deported to Auschwitz, she was handed over to her mother's cousin in the hope of being saved. Judy never saw her parents again. Her father was a trained rabbi and archaeologist who worked in the Jewish Museum of Budapest. Vera Gara. Vera was born in Vienna, Austria in 1933. Vera was a child survivor and survived Bergen-Belsen concentration camp as well as Theresienstadt, north of Prague. Vera has been a major contributor to Holocaust education in Ottawa schools and the former chair of the Holocaust Education Committee for a long time. Thank you for being here with us, Vera. Ruth Gottlieb Katz. Ruth was born in Berlin in 1927 and would witness the rise of anti-Semitism in Germany. As a young Jewish girl, she would suffer physical and verbal abuse. As a refugee to Canada and a teacher in Quebec schools for over 45 years, Ruth has contributed to Holocaust education and discussions for many years. Okay. She's from Vancouver? Thank you, sir. David Moskowitz. David was born in 1929 in Konec, Czechoslovakia. He was 14 years old when he arrived in Auschwitz-Birkenau. Same age as my father. One week before Auschwitz was liberated, David was among 55,000 prisoners who went on a forced march to Loslau camp and from there was shipped by train to Buchenwald. David was at Buchenwald for 2.5 years. an honorable mention for Mariette Dodek, survivor, who's here from Vancouver. Thank you for being here, Mariette. I understand that you spoke last night at the center, at the Jewish Community Center. So I want to thank all of the survivors and the March of the Living students that accompanied them, and invite Cantor Green to lead us in song.
Mizmor David, Adonai roi lo echsar, binotesh yabitzeini, al mei menuchot yenahaleini. נפשי ישובב ינחני ומגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא ירא רע כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. דשנת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me to lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside the still waters. God restores my soul. God guides me in straight paths for God's name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I shall live in the house of the Lord forever.
It's my privilege and honor to now introduce the Prime Minister of the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau.
Thank you, Lawrence. Bonjour. Hello. Shalom. I want to begin by thanking the survivors who are here. Thank you for your strength, for your commitment to continuing to share to future generations and the stories that you have told now and for years past. I want to thank the students who are here as well. Those of you who are here today come with a responsibility as well. Your responsibility is also to be sharing with all those students from your schools who couldn't be here today. We need to make sure that everyone is telling the stories of the Holocaust and making sure that on this day and every day we recommit ourselves to never again and having young people here to be empowered by what you hear from survivors, the conversations we have is really important about making sure that it gets properly shared around our communities and around our country. Je veux aussi remercier tous les leaders, politiciens et parlementaires d'être ici aujourd'hui pour honorer la mémoire des victimes de l'Holocauste, une des périodes les plus sombres de l'histoire. Today we mark Yom HaShoah. It is a day to remember and mourn the millions of Jews senselessly murdered in the Holocaust. The Nazi genocide of Jewish people remains the largest in human history, eliminating 2/3 of the Jewish population of Europe. Families were wiped away, and communities that have lived safely in different countries for generations were destroyed. On a tous un devoir de mémoire. Ce devoir, on doit l'exercer à travers l'éducation, la sensibilisation et la prise de conscience. On doit l'exercer en confrontant toutes les formes de haine, d'intolérance et d'antisémitisme. As we pay tribute to the memory of the victims and the resiliency of survivors, we reaffirm our pledge to never forget. I met Pinchas yesterday at the Toronto Holocaust Museum. Pinchas has an extraordinary memory. He has contributed significantly to various Holocaust memorials, and indeed is actually contributing to an AI that will help future generations have actual conversations with Holocaust survivors. For him, what hurts the most is of all that he can remember, he cannot remember the face of his twin sister, Sabina. All he can remember is her blonde, braided ponytail when she ran over to their mother for one last hug as they arrived at the Majdanek concentration camp in 1943. The trauma was just too much for his brain. Even given this, for his entire life, Pinchas has been committed to education, sharing both his story and the experiences of other survivors. I also met Rose yesterday, a Holocaust survivor who inspires me and others with her fierce commitment to life and to peace. En parlant avec des survivants, ça m'a rappelé que ma génération et moi avons eu le privilège d'entendre leurs récits de vive voix et d'en tirer des leçons, alors que les plus jeunes, aujourd'hui, forment leur compréhension du monde. On doit s'assurer que les leçons de l'Holocauste leur soient enseignées. It's up to all of us now to share the stories, to keep the memories alive, and to educate future generations about the anti-Semitism, the hatred, and the silence that enabled such evil. Our government understands this, and it's why we created a dedicated position to carry out this work, our special envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism. Our current special envoy, Deborah Lyons, had big shoes to fill after taking over from Erwin Kotler, but she's incredibly strong and been doing tremendous work. Right now, Deborah is in Poland with Canadian students for the March of the Living. As was mentioned, and as I'm sure you can all attest, this annual educational program to ensure Holocaust remembrance is unbelievably important, perhaps more important than ever. Here in Canada, we're also creating a new permanent National Holocaust Remembrance program so that everyone can learn about the atrocities committed by the Nazis and the prevalence of unbridled anti-Semitism that led to it. Et En tant que gouvernement, on soutient la construction de nouveaux centres éducatifs sur l'Holocauste partout au pays, incluant à Montréal, Toronto et Vancouver. This year, Yom HaShoah and its message comes at an incredibly difficult moment for Jewish communities in Canada and around the world. The October 7th Hamas terrorist attacks, the murder of friends, family, and loved ones in Israel, was the largest killing of Jews since the Holocaust. And since October 7th, there has been a disturbing increase in anti-Semitism to a scale we had not witnessed for generations. Windows of synagogues have been broken and shot at, Jewish stores vandalized. All of these acts open wounds of painful chapters in our collective history. There are people out there who are still denying the Holocaust. There are people out there who are denying what happened on October 7th. And I know that too often over the past months, Jewish Canadians have felt and have been isolated and unsafe in their communities. People have felt unsafe to live openly Jewish lives in Canada, and that's not right. Let me be clear. In a country like Canada, it should be, and it must be, safe to declare oneself a Zionist, Jewish or not. Zionism is not a dirty word or something anyone should be targeted for agreeing with. It is the belief, at its simplest, that Jewish people, like all peoples, have the right to determine their own future. Shortly after the Holocaust, Israel was established as a safe haven for Jewish people, a place to live in security and with dignity, a place to build a future without fear. Threatening, harassing, and excluding Canadians because of their faith, their identity, or because they support the Jewish people's right to self-determination in their ancestral homeland is absolutely unacceptable. You can be a Zionist and strongly support the creation of a Palestinian state living in peace and security alongside Israel, a view I know is shared by many in the Jewish community and across Canada. That's my belief, too. Urgent work is needed now more than ever to keep that vision alive, of a two-state solution, of a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace. Anti-Semitism in every form, whether it's on the internet or in certain chants we've been hearing, is unacceptable. We all know that anti-Semitism wasn't new 80 years ago, and it didn't stop in 1945. And as my friend Erwin Kotler taught me, anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine of global hatred. What starts with Jews never ends with Jews. Ce qui cible les Juifs ne se limite jamais aux Juifs. On peut penser aux différents groupes ciblés et persécutés par les nazis. L'antisémitisme ne menace pas juste la communauté juive, ça menace nos valeurs communes, notre sécurité et notre démocratie. Ça met en danger notre capacité de vivre dans un pays où chacun peut contribuer à son plein potentiel. That's why combating anti-Semitism requires hard work every day. And this work cannot be a problem for the Jewish community to solve alone. It is not a problem for Deborah or Jewish organizations to solve alone. It is not a problem for governments to solve alone, though we will and must continue to do everything we can. It is up to everyone to take on this challenge, all Canadians together. Yom HaShoah nous rappelle aussi l'immense résilience du peuple juif, qui a non seulement survécu à des tragédies inimaginables tout au long de l'histoire, mais en est ressorti encore plus fort. Ensemble, on va passer à travers ce moment incroyablement difficile aussi. Our government will never stop fighting to protect your right to live openly and proudly Jewish lives in Canada now and forever. This year, our vow of never again is more important than ever. We stand with you against this wave of rising anti-Semitism, and we add to this year's vow, not now, not ever. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I call upon the Honourable Pierre, Leader of the Opposition, to provide comment.
Shalom. Bonjour. Survivors, March of the Living students, assembled guests. On nous dit que ceux qui oublient l'histoire sont condamnés à la répéter. We're told that those who forget history are condemned to repeat it. That is why the annual commemoration, Yom HaShoah, is so important. It is important to remember and educate of the ugly, totalitarian ideology of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which metastasized into a bloody dictatorship, a Second World War, and, as we commemorate today, possibly the most evil attempt at mass extermination of an entire people that the world has ever seen. This, along with communist socialism, brought together two twin ideologies of the 20th century that unleashed havoc and death on peoples, often for no other reason than their race, their religion, their ancestry. Over 6 million Jews were murdered in labor camps, concentration camps, and death camps. Some of the survivors are still with us today, imparting their stories and ensuring that the next generation learns those stories. It's almost 80 years now since 1945. 80 years is roughly the life expectancy in most developed countries. So it isn't by accident that memories start to fade right about now. And as these memories have faded, these same ugly totalitarian ideologies have gained favor. And with the same hateful rhetoric, and in some cases, the same precursor actions playing themselves out today. We see at university campuses the hateful anti-Jewish rhetoric directed at innocent students. We see fire bombings of Canadian synagogues, something we never would have imagined a short time ago. I know that some of you are making the heart-wrenching decision. Do I walk outside with the Star of David on my chest? Do I wear my kippah? Do I keep my mezuzah on the door? You worry about the safety of your loved ones in Canada. It is absolutely unacceptable that you should be faced with this dilemma. You must be allowed to live fearlessly and proudly Jewish lives, and it is the responsibility of every Canadian, Jewish or otherwise, to stand with your right to do that. The hatred that we see in our streets, of course, has been amplified by the genocidal attacks of Hamas on October the 7th, almost 7 months ago. This was an attempt at genocide. It was the biggest mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust. It was carried out by an organization that had full autonomous control over Gaza and enjoyed a ceasefire. It was living right next to the Jewish state, which had vacated the Gazan lands and allowed, with perhaps some retrospective, we look back on that decision and we look back at what it resulted in. It allowed the Hamas regime to make autonomous decisions in governing that land. And as of October 6th, there was a ceasefire. And then on October 7th, Hamas carried out one of the most sadistic attacks ever witnessed in human history. The only difference between the Nazis and Hamas is that while the Nazis were cowardice and in some cases attempt to cover up their evil, the Hamas terrorists bragged about it, recorded it, put it on display on social media, took sadistic delight in what it had done. To this day, Hamas has said that if it gets the chance, it will repeat the attacks of October 7th. And that is why it is incumbent on all democratic governments to state clearly that there is only one way to end this conflict, and that is for Hamas to disarm, to surrender, and to turn over the hostages, bring them home. Here in Canada, we must do more than speak the right words. Never again requires action, real action. It is appalling that 4 years after the anti-Semitic and genocidal terrorist group, the IRGC, killed 55 Canadians in the PS 752 attack, and 7 months after that same terrorist group helped coordinate Hamas's attack on Israel, the IRGC still operates legally in Canada with 700 agents on the ground. We must immediately criminalize and list the IRGC as terrorists today. We must establish a foreign influence registry to identify all the foreign agents that foment disagreement and division on the ground, and those that work for the Iranian regime must be exposed. We must evaluate Canada's threat assessment of terrorist attacks in light of the fact that we have had terrorist attacks target Canadian shuls. We must remove red tape and speed up access to the security infrastructure program so that we can defend all places of worship, Jewish and otherwise, against terrorist attacks. We must coordinate all law enforcement and intelligence bodies in one unified task force so that they can share information on imminent strikes so that those can be interrupted before they metastasize into a murderous attack. And we must condemn and defeat the ugly 20th century ideologies that are recurring again. It is worth noting that hate crimes between 2015 and 2022 had already risen by over 160%. That is before the attacks of October 7th. In the last year, anti-Semitic attacks are up over 100%. That is double. That means the Jewish people are being doubly victimized. Once with the bloodshed they witnessed in their homeland of Israel, and again on the streets and in their synagogues. This ideology, which seeks to divide people into identity groups, turn them against each other, and preach hatred between the peoples of our country, must stop. We must replace it with an identity, with an ideology that views everyone as an individual, that celebrates their personal character rather than denigrating their group identity. We must recognize that the Jewish people are always the first to be victims of this hatred, but are never the last. And the Jewish people who are here today who asked those terrible questions about whether they can display their Jewish symbols, from this Gentile, I have this message. You are not alone. You have friends. You have friends that stand with you, now and always. Friends that will stand up for Israel's right to defend itself. Friends that will stand with you against the ugly violence and hatred on our campuses and in our communities. Friends that will restore a Canada where you feel safe to espouse your faith in the security of your community. Friends who will be with you as always. I am honored to consider myself one of those friends. To the students who were part of the March of Living Committee. I did the March of the Living years ago between Auschwitz, the first concentration camp, and Birkenau, the most deadly of the death camps. And amid all the horror that history testifies in those places, I saw hope. There I saw young Jews placing stones on larger rocks, rocks acting as the replacement for tombstones that were never able to be laid, with the message to ancestors that we're here, we still love you, we haven't forgotten. Israeli flags blowing in the wind, the Star of David in the sky, as a message to the defeated Nazis, you will not stop us. We are still here. We are still Jewish. We sing the same songs, practice the same faith on the same land as our ancestors over 3,000 years ago. The trash can of history is filled with those who have tried and failed to destroy the Jewish people. And once again, the Jewish people will triumph. Your friends will stand with you in this triumph, and we will say loudly, here and everywhere, never again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pierre. Now I'll call upon Ambassador Moed to provide remarks.
Shalom. Survivors, permit me to add to our presence today another survivor, Shlomo Mansour. Shlomo Mansour is one of the 132 hostages being held in Gaza. He just celebrated his 86th birthday. He survived the Farhud, the pogroms that was inflicted upon the Jewish community in Iraq. He was taken from his home and is held in Gaza. "84 years ago today, yesterday, on May 5th, 1942, a law went into effect halfway across the world. It forced the Jews of Holland, my mother, my father, to wear this yellow Star of David, within which was printed a single word, Yod, Jew. On that day in Holland, hate took a word, our name, from us. It labeled and humanized us, and it squarely, anti-Semitically set us down the path to genocide. As has happened so many times before, words and speech, lies and libels turned hearts and minds against us and released unspeakable horrors upon us. Still, we managed to survive and to respond never again. Today, it seems the world has forgotten never again, and never again is now. When a gang of genocidal terror groups steered by Iran unleash barbaric war upon Israel, when Iran and its allies relentlessly vow to utterly destroy the state of Israel, when anti-Semitic hate marches incessantly tramp the streets and free spaces of towns and squares, when Jews are attacked, intimidated, and threatened the world over, when terrorist glorifiers such as Samidun incite anti-Jewish hatred by chanting "From the river to the sea" in a call for the annihilation of the Jewish state of Israel, never again is now. Jew, Yod. This is the actual patch my father wore, not by choice. Today, here, I wear it with you by choice, as a reminder that all begins with words, hateful words strung together in hateful speech and with hateful intent towards hateful deeds. Today, I proudly reclaim this symbol, this word, this name, and I share it with you as a badge of honor and as a call for action. Rise up against hateful words and hateful actions. Let us retake the halls of learning and establish programs of anti-Semitism education. Let PLFP-linked Samidun and those like it be designated terrorist organizations. Let us stand together in common struggle for the values that connect us, for humanity. Not only never again is now, it is right here, right now. We have come a long way since the time of this yellow star. We have a home now, Israel exists, and our colors are blue and white. Israel is strong, together we are strong. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you.
Toda Rabba. I'd like to invite the ambassador of Lithuania, Ambassador Skusevičius, to introduce the next guest, Atis Bankas. Ambassador.
Good morning, bonjour, shalom, laba diena. It is my honor to present Atis Bankas, who was born in Lithuania in a family of Holocaust survivors. During Soviet occupation, he found refuge here in Canada. Professor at Glenn Gould School at the Royal Conservatory, longtime member of the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, and founder and artistic director of Music Niagara Festival for more than 25 years. Atis happens to be the first and only immigrant to hold such position among classical music festivals in Canada. The first piece of music performed by Atis Bankas will be A Boda by Ernest Bloch.
Thank you, Atis. I'm told in Lithuanian I'm supposed to say ačiū at this point without the necessity of a sneeze. So ačiū, Atis, and the Lithuanian ambassador. I'd like to invite you to watch an address from Mr. Ronald Lauder, President of the World Jewish Congress, and hopefully it will magically appear.
I want to thank the National Holocaust Monument Committee for the opportunity to join you today, with apologies that I cannot be with you in person. I know there are many distinguished speakers and guests, prime ministers, parliamentarians, ambassadors, but most important of all, there are survivors of the concentration camps that I want to thank the National Holocaust Monument Committee for the opportunity to join you today, with apologies that I cannot be with you in person.
Excuse me, we have a technical hitch. Who would have thought that it was overheating? So please bear with us for a few minutes.
I know there are many distinguished speakers and guests, prime ministers, parliamentarians, ambassadors, but most important of all, there are survivors of the concentration camps there today. You are the last living witnesses of the terrible events we observe today. I'm so grateful that you are with us, especially since there are people who still deny that the Holocaust ever happened. I want to commend the Canadian government for its commitment to Holocaust remembrance and support for the work undertaken at the Holocaust centers across the country. I want to acknowledge the unwavering support of the opposition and the steadfast leadership it has shown in its vocal criticism of anti-Semitism in all of its ugly forms. But I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that today's Holocaust Remembrance Day falls on a very, very difficult time for the Jewish people worldwide. Last October 7th, Israel was invaded across its border by jihadist terrorists with one aim: to murder as many Jews as possible. Entire families burnt alive, babies beheaded, countless women raped, and more than 300 Israelis kidnapped. This sounds like something from World War II, but it was just 7 months ago. It's hard to even imagine this happening to Canada or the United States because our borders have been so peaceful. It seems forever. Israel is not that lucky. So when Israel did what any other country would do on these obscene circumstances, it's condemned throughout the world, and in Canada as well, especially in your universities. Once again, the Jewish state is held to a different standard than any other country on earth. Once again, Jewish people are murdered and the world blames them. I'm sure that most Canadians don't believe the lies and unfair criticism heaped on Israel since October 7th. But if you want to understand why there is a Jewish state and why there must always be a Jewish state, look no further than your own borders after World War II. Well after the horrors of the death camps were revealed to the entire world, Canada let in former Nazis, but but closed its doors to Jewish survivors. We remember the shameful policy concerning Jewish immigration at that time, and the statement that still stings: none is too many. In all fairness, Canada was no different than many other countries, but the Jewish people learned a hard lesson from it. The world is indifferent to Jewish suffering, and that is why there must be a Jewish state of Israel. It's been said that it's good that we commemorate this day, but something like the Holocaust won't happen again. But it did just 7 months ago, and once again the world's shamed. We see the same reaction. I sincerely hope next year's event is observed in more peaceful times, and let's hope we all learn lessons from it. I thank you and wish you well.
Thank you, Mr. Lauder. If I could ask the Ambassador of Hungary, Maria Vass-Salazar, to come forward and offer remarks. Thank you.
Right Honorable Prime Minister, honorable members of Parliament, ministers, distinguished leaders of Jewish organizations, Your Excellencies, Mesdames et Messieurs. It is a distinct honor for me to commemorate Yom HaShoah with you and to offer a few words as the representative of a country where the Holocaust happened and where it has been and will forever be a painful, unforgettable, and unforgivable tragedy. I am humbled to be in the presence of Holocaust survivors. Your courage and strength offer us examples we can only hope to live up to. This year marks the 80th anniversary of the Holocaust in Hungary. In April 1944, the first ghettos were created in Hungary. And in the month that followed, the persecution, deportation, and murder of nearly 600,000 Hungarian Jewish people were committed in a horrific and expedited manner. It is deeply saddening that the wartime Hungarian state failed to protect its Jewish population. Instead, it collaborated with occupying Nazi forces in implementing the unprecedented horrors of the Holocaust. La tragédie de l'Holocauste a laissé une blessure incurable pour notre nation. La perte et la douleur demeurent éternelles et font partie du chapitre le plus sombre de notre histoire. Although there were many people, known and unknown heroes, who risked their lives to save Jews in Hungary, the responsibility of the Hungarian regime at the time in committing unspeakable crimes against the Jewish people, and in fact against humanity, was unforgivably grave. The responsibility of our generation is to ensure that such unspeakable crimes could indeed never happen again. Il est de notre devoir, est un impératif moral pour nous, de garder le souvenir de l'Holocauste vivant, pour que ces horreurs, les événements tragiques de la Shoah, ne se reproduisent plus jamais. C'est pourquoi le gouvernement de la Hongrie a déclaré et pratique tolérance zéro pour toutes les formes d'antisémitisme. We believe that the strong and meaningful statement, "Never again," that we declared during Holocaust Remembrance has to be bolstered by action, so that the perils of indifference, as Elie Wiesel famously put it, could not prevail, could not allow the spread of hatred. Holocaust remembrance and education have been important parts of that effort in Hungary, including with the introduction of Holocaust education in school curriculum since 2000, as well as deepening the knowledge of the Holocaust via museums and education centers. Holocaust education was also a key priority during the Hungarian presidency of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Fostering the revival of the vibrant Jewish religious and cultural life in Hungary has been another important and rewarding part of these efforts. We are very proud of our thriving Jewish community and rich Jewish cultural life in today's Hungary. The Hungarian Jewish Cultural Festival has been a prominent annual event for 25 years. Over the last decade, there has been a wide-ranging program to restore dozens of synagogues and Jewish cemeteries throughout the country, including the one from where the Canadian-Hungarian Hasidic community of Boisbriand originates. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi d'avoir fait la connaissance de la communauté juive hassidique de plus de 4000 personnes qui vivent à Boisbriand, Québec, et qui sont originaires de l'Est de Hongrie, de Nyírtas, et qui ont gardé leur identité hongroise jusqu'à nos jours. Un nouveau centre de pèlerinage a été construit à Nyírtas, qui est un des points de réflexion et de repos sur le chemin de pèlerinage permettant de faire revivre les traditions de la communauté juive d'avant-guerre et d'organiser des rassemblements liés aux visites régulières à la tombe du grand rabbin qui avait fondé la communauté. Distinguished guests, on the 80th anniversary of the Holocaust, the Federation of the Hungarian Jewish Communities declared 2024 the Year of Remembrance. This anniversary is not only a poignant reminder of the evil that swept across Europe 8 decades ago, but it is also a source of inspiration and encouragement for all of us to stand up and speak out against any form of hate and to actively counter anti-Semitism, which is shockingly on the rise today. Hungary has learned a painful lesson from the Holocaust. We know exactly what it means when hatred turns into devastation, when fear or indifference paralyzes the majority. This heart-wrenching knowledge should strengthen our resolve, even further, to do everything in our power to prevent another Holocaust. It is with this commitment that we remember and pay tribute to the victims of the Holocaust. Zironam livraha. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention. Thank you very much for your attention.
Because of the presence of so many students here today, I just want to add a little something to the comments about none is too many. None is too many was the unofficial, but in practice, policy of the Canadian government when it came to how many Jews could come to Canada after the Holocaust. That's where that was the inspiration for the book that was written by the late Irving Abella, and that's a policy that was in place post-World War II.
For all of us, one of the things, and I'm the husband of a small Jewish Israeli leader here. The policy was before World War II. After World War II, Canada accepted a large number of survivors. Mr. Lauder made a mistake.
It's okay.
All of us need to learn.
Thank you. Ambassador Maria Vass-Salazar, Kusanem Sepen. I'd ask Judy Young-Drake to come to the microphone to offer some remarks. Please come forward.
Yeah, that's good, thank you. I'm afraid there's going to be a little bit of repetition with other speakers, but it's inevitable. Le devoir de mémoire est le titre que j'aimerais donner à ces quelques mots qui suivent, mais en anglais. It was almost exactly 80 years ago, in the spring and summer of 1944, that the murderous part of the Holocaust came to Újpest, the suburb of Budapest, where I lived with my family. I do not remember what happened to us, as I was just 1 year old when my parents, 3 of my grandparents, and various other family members were taken, first to a brickyard outside Budapest, and then forced into the cattle cars of one of the very, very last death trains with which the Nazis and their Hungarian collaborators deported 440,000 Hungarian Jews and thousands of Hungarian Roma to Auschwitz-Birkenau, never to return. At the last minute, I was handed to a relative and remained hidden until liberation, though in many ways I remained hidden for much longer than the end of the war and the liberation of the camps. My adoptive mother decided to hide all information from me about my family, even though she was a cousin of my mother. In fact, she did not want me to know anything about the Holocaust or even to grow up as a Jew. So I've had a lot of research to find out facts about my family and myself. To this day, I don't know who it was that hid me in 1944 or where I was hidden. And I know very little about my parents, especially my mother. So I may not remember much, but I can never forget. And actually, the older I get, the more the Holocaust weighs on me. This is so not just for me, but for my children, and perhaps even my grandchildren. In thinking about what to say today, I spoke to my daughters, and they reminded me of how my life and my life choices had been hugely influenced by the Holocaust, and that I had been cut off from my origins by becoming assimilated first in the UK, where I lived for 10 years after leaving Hungary in 1957. Naturally, they also feel that their lives had been affected, as indeed they have, by my being a Holocaust survivor. While it is true that nowadays the Holocaust is a reality of my everyday life, and the search for the family I never knew continues, at the same time, I do feel very grateful for having received a wonderful education in the UK in the 1960s, and also for the best job that I could ever dream of having in Ottawa, helping to develop and build the Canadian government's multiculturalism policies and programs throughout the 1970s and 1980s. And a colleague of mine from there is here to listen to this. Did I say there? I mean here. Meanwhile, the search for the meaning of my survival continues. I believe, with well-known Holocaust survivor Edith Bruck in Italy, that remembering is a moral imperative, and this too has been said before. Moral imperative, and that Jews especially have an obligation never to forget, and a responsibility to speak out against hatred in all its forms and seek justice for victims and those in trouble, wherever that may be. So on this Yom HaShoah, we should also remind ourselves of the situation of those who are now suffering in Israel and around the world as a result of hatred, racism, and anti-Semitism. For me personally, this includes the responsibility to share my story so that the current generation and the next one can help to make the world a better place. Thank you.
Call upon Ambassador Yamanouchi of Japan to offer remarks on Sugihara, a Japanese diplomat who saved Jewish lives, and on Hannah's suitcase and selected slides.
Shalom, bonjour, good afternoon, kwe, konnichiwa. I'm so humbled here, and it is my honor to share with you the stories on Holocaust. Two stories. One is about a Japanese diplomat who was stationed in Kaunas between 1939 and 40. The other story is a Jewish girl who was killed in Auschwitz at the age of 13. But two stories connected with Japan somehow. So I hope you listen to my story. I tried to make it very short. The Sugihara came to Kaunas as the acting consul because Kaunas was a very strategically important place. So he was collecting information and intelligence on the movement of Germany and Red Army of Soviet Union. Then the September 1st, war started. Then next year, in the morning of July 18th, that's Saturday, he woke up 6 o'clock, because he had very interesting sounds, unfamiliar sounds and noises. So he opened the window. What he saw was hundreds of Jewish people seeking the visa to the Japanese consul. It was not what he expected, because all those Jewish people tried to escape to the west, but west was occupied by Germany. So the only possible way out was to the east, to Japan. So those Jewish refugees came to the Japanese consul. But at that time, the Japanese government was negotiating the alliance with Germany. And the Japanese government was preparing the non-aggression pact with Soviet Union. Therefore, dealing with Jewish refugees was a very, very tough issue. So at that night, Sugihara had a sleepless night. As a diplomat, he ought to follow the instruction from the government. Don't write the visa. But as a human being, he's a person who believes in humanity. So he had a struggle inside. So he had a sleepless night until next morning. Then at the next morning, he decided, I hear my true voice from my heart. So against the instruction from the home government, he started to write visas, handwriting. In 6 weeks, he wrote visas more than 2,000. And he had a pressure from the government. But at the same time, he had a pressure from the Soviet Union, because now Kaunas is occupied by Soviet. So Soviet request to close the consulate. But he was making excuse, then he was writing visas to the refugees. It is a matter of up until 31st of August, the year. Then he wrote more than 2,000 visas, and it is said that thousands of Jewish lives were saved by his visas. Those Jewish refugees traveled from Kaunas to Moscow to the Vladivostok, then to Japan. But Sugihara was considered an officer who violated the instruction. So he was basically kicked out from the Japanese government after the war. The Jewish people remember him, but somehow all the records and documents were lost because of the war. So the Jewish people could not find him until 1967. It was an amazing story. A Jewish, Israeli diplomat in Tokyo found him. Up until then, he didn't tell anything about the visas because he thought it was a disgrace in terms of the government sort of ideas. But Jewish people respected him. The next year, he was invited to Israel. Then he met all those leaders. Then he said those visas he wrote was at the risk of losing his jobs. So that was a moment of the Jewish people realized what he did exactly. Then he became considered as righteous among the people, 1984.
2 years later, he passed away due to the heart disease at the age of 86. That is about the story about Sugihara. But I would like to express, without Jewish community who tirelessly seek him, discover him, that was because of that I'm here to tell about his story. Otherwise, the truth wouldn't be come out to the world. The second story is a very different one. But this is the girl called Hannah Brady, who was born 1931, May 16. And she was killed at Auschwitz, 1944, October 23, at the age of 13. Then, except her family members, her name was forgotten. She was just one of those 6 million Jews who were killed in Holocaust. Times passed. 46 years later, year 2000, in Japan, one Japanese woman whose name is Fumiko Ishioka. She is running the non-profit organization for the Holocaust education in Japan. Then she had a connection with a museum at the Auschwitz. So she borrowed their one item. That is a suitcase. So that is a good example to educate the Japanese girls what happened. Then Fumiko discovered one little sign, name of the suitcase. Hannah Brady, born 1931, May 16. So she got interested. This is life. So she tirelessly worked hard to discover who she was. So she made many trips. Then she discovered a living brother, elder brother called George. So George lived in Canada. So she came to Canada to meet with his elder brother, George. Then Fumiko Ishioka, had a story of little girl who only had a 13 years life. Before beautiful life starts, she passed away. But then that story itself was amazing. Then one Canadian journalist, Karen Levine, discovered this story. So she did the radio documentary and wrote a book called Hannah's Suitcase. That became the best-selling book, and here and in Japan. So one thing I want to tell you is, yes, we are here, all here, to commit to never again. But telling the story, seeking the truth, and pass down the story to the next generation is very, very important to remember. Otherwise, all those untold story was not told. So I ask you to work together to discover truth, facts, details, and to tell the story to the next generation for never again. Thank you very much.
Ambassador Yamanouchi, arigato. Special thank you to Karen Levine, the former CBC radio producer and author of Hannah's Suitcase, for permission to use the photos in the slideshow presentation. And thank you, Ambassador Yamanouchi, for your remarks, as well as the Toronto Board of Education via the Canadian Society for Yad Vashem for providing the initial lesson plan on Hannah's Suitcase, and to the Center for Holocaust Education and Scholarship for adapting that lesson plan and distribution to local schools here in Ottawa, the Ottawa Carleton District School Board. It's a story that's being told over and over again. Thank you very much. I'd like to invite David Gronowski, the Director of Government Relations, B'nai B'rith, to provide remarks. David.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here today to deliver remarks on behalf of B'nai B'rith Canada, this country's most senior human rights organization. Chaque année, à mesure que nous nous éloignons de la conclusion de la Shoah, l'importance de la commémoration de l'Holocauste devient encore plus vitale. Cependant, cette année, la tâche qui consiste non seulement à commémorer, mais aussi à tirer les leçons du passé, semble encore plus importante. A few hours ago on Parliament Hill, my colleagues and I unveiled B'nai B'rith's audit of anti-Semitic incidents for 2023. The figures are alarming, unfortunately. They paint an ominous picture. Last year, B'nai B'rith Canada recorded an over 100% increase in incidents of anti-Semitism compared to the year prior. Violent incidents rose by over 200%. En ce temps de montée injustifiable de l'antisémitisme, il est impératif que nous tirons les leçons des erreurs commises par les générations précédentes, et notamment de l'expérience des peuples hongrois pendant l'Holocauste. Rather than reject the virulent influence of the Nazi regime, many Hungarians chose to embrace its hate-filled policies. Pragmatic indifference allowed the plague of anti-Semitism to consume the Hungarian population. The consequences of such complacency are clear. The Nazis and their collaborators were able to murder or to deport over half of the country's Jewish population to the concentration camps and their gas chambers within 4 months of the German invasion of Hungary. Plus jamais ne doit pas seulement signifier que les Juifs ne seront pas plus jamais des victimes. To prevent history from repeating itself, never again must mean that never again will whole nations, indeed whole civilizations, turn their backs on their fellow human beings. Considering the data released today by B'nai B'rith Canada, it is clear that in Canada, the time for never again is now. Now. Today, as we reflect on the past, we must also give due consideration to our future. The anti-Semitism overwhelming our nation right now requires a national response. A national response. And I encourage each and every one of you to heed history's warnings and to take action to ensure that our country, our Canada, remains a welcoming and safe place for all. Yes, for all. May the memories of the 6 million be a blessing. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'd like to call on Annette to come forward, make a special presentation to Ambassador Sparwasser, who's been with us from the very beginning, been with us on days that were not nearly as nice as today. Cold, wet, winter days. Annette.
Thank you. Ambassador Sparwasser, we heard through the grapevine that you're soon to be retiring from diplomatic service. On behalf of the National Holocaust Monument Committee and all of us here, we would like to wish you personal fulfillment and joy in the years to come. You have supported our events right from the very beginning, and your focus on Holocaust remembrance and historical reckoning has profoundly influenced education and cultural understanding, both in Ottawa and across Canada. Ambassador Sparwasser.
Well, as somebody who tears up when I watch Suits, I don't know how we're going to make it through this one. Addis Bankus will play Schindler's List theme song by John Williams. Addis. Thank you, Edis. I'd invite Shimon Koffler, President and CEO of CJA, to offer closing remarks. Shimon?
Distingués invités, Mesdames et Messieurs, en ce qui concerne Yom HaShoah, il n'y a rien que je puisse dire que vous ne sachiez déjà, que vous n'ayez déjà entendu. Mais ce que je peux faire, c'est partager un point de vue sur ce que tout cela signifie aujourd'hui, alors que nous essayons de donner un sens aux réalités choquantes auxquelles nous sommes confrontés. As Yossi Klein Halevi put it, who could have imagined that the most passionate outbreak of student activism since the 1960s would be devoted to delegitimizing the Jewish people's story of triumph over annihilation? As he notes, this moment did not happen in a vacuum, and the anti-Zionist forces within the academy have been preparing the ground for decades, systematically dismantling the moral basis of each stage of Jewish history. The attack began with the transformation of an incredible story of rebirth, a story of a dispossessed indigenous people repatriated to its ancestral homeland into an expression of European colonialism. The birth of the Jewish state was then reduced to the Nakba, a Palestinian narrative of total innocence that ignores the ethnic cleansing of Jews from every place where Arab armies were victorious and the uprooting of the entire Jewish population of the Muslim world. In 1967, Israel was cast as an apartheid state, turning Zionism, a rich, multifaceted movement representing Jews from across the political and religious spectrum, into a racist ideology. And now, with the Gaza war, we witness the playing of the genocide canard, the punchline in the process of delegitimization. To turn the Jewish state into the world's arch criminal requires three forms of erasure. Erasing the connection between the land of Israel and the people of Israel, 4,000 years reduced to a political contrivance. The second is the erasure of the relentless war against Israel. Only by erasing Hamas's atrocities and ambitions can Israel be branded with the mark of Cain. Dismissing Hamas's actions, campus protesters are effectively shilling for October 7 denialism, the newest iteration of Holocaust denial, so prevalent in parts of the Muslim world. The atrocities didn't happen, you deserve them, and we're going to do it again and again. La troisième forme d'effacement consiste à rejeter l'histoire des offres de paix présentées par Israël et rejetées par les Palestiniens. There is in the annals of history no parallel example of another national movement representing a stateless people that rejected more offers of self-determination than that accorded to Palestinian leadership. Anti-Semitism, as Bernard Lewis observed, is not just hatred of Jews. It is to attach to the Jew the idea of cosmic evil. For millennia, Christians saw the Jew as the murderer of God. For the Marxist, the Jew was the ultimate controlling capitalist. For Nazism, the Jew was the defiler of race. And now in the era of anti-Semitism, of anti-racism rather, the Jew and the Jewish state are the embodiment of the quintessential racist. All of this happens because our story has been set aside. As we have become universalists, we have abandoned our own story, our lived experience. So in that regard, we're grateful to the Prime Minister and the Government of Canada for the wide and meaningful scope of initiatives that have been put into place to address anti-Semitism, from Holocaust education to community security. We're deeply appreciative of the unequivocal support expressed by the leader of the opposition, both for the Jewish state and for the Jewish people. Just as we lament the failure of some others in Parliament to decode and reject the distorted narrative that forsakes truth in favor of the trend du jour. Never again is happening again. But we can prevent it. We can tell our story. We can teach our story and reclaim our history. That is the imperative of the day. That is the charge we dare not ignore. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shimon. We call on Rabbi Iddo Moed to lead us in prayer. Rabbi? I see you have an assistant.
We'll now recite the Kaddish, the ancient generational memorial prayer. We'll be saying it having in mind the millions of those murdered in the Holocaust just for being Jewish, and all of those that have been murdered since just for being Jewish, through the devastating day of October 7th up until today. We ask everyone to please rise. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma divra chirusei, v'yamlich malchusei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beis Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach, li'olam u'li'omei olmaya, yisbarach v'yishtabach v'yispa'ar v'yisromam v'yisnasei, v'yisadar v'yisalev v'yisalal, shmei dekudsha berichu. Li'ela min kol berchasa v'shirasa, tushbechasa v'nechemasa, ta'amiran bi'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen.
Floral of Cats to sing O Canada.
Ô Canada, terre de nos aïeux, ton front est ceint de fleurs en glorieux. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
from Moscow, if you would come forward to sing Hatikva. There you are.
Kolod barevav penima nefesh Yehudi homia ulfate mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia Od lo tikvatenu Hatikva b'shnot alpayim Liotam chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim Liotam chofshi be'artzenu Eretz Zion Yerushalayim.
I want to thank everyone for being here. Though the sun is out, we haven't had a lot of sunshine on our community, not just here, but everywhere. We've heard some wonderful speeches and presentations about what is and what should be. Let's take those messages out there and turn them into action. Thanks everyone for being here. Reminder to lay stones on your way out. And I would ask only that the Holocaust survivors and the presenters come to the podium for photographs. Merci beaucoup pour être ici aujourd'hui. On va continuer la lutte.